Welcome back to the Young Entrepreneurs Podcast, the podcast where a high schooler can learn how to take their passion and turn it into a business. Today we have on serial entrepreneur Michael Fensterstock. Currently, Mr. Fensterstock is serving as the Chief of Staff for Jay Walker, previous interviewee. As serial entrepreneur, Mr. Fensterstock managed Director of Sales and Marketing and Branding at Epicure, as well as Bathwater Kids and Aromafage. There will be 3 key takeaways for this episode. Number 1 being how to identify and engage with your customers. Number 2 being what key lessons you should take away when you fail as an entrepreneur. And number 3, why you should always stay hungry. Mr. Fensterstock, thanks for coming on.
It's a pleasure to be here. I'm excited.
Great. Let's get into the questions.
Mr. Fensterstock, when did you get into entrepreneurship?
It's an interesting question. It's not really like I got into entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is sort of like a bug one has when one, for me at least, was a little kid. And I would take a giant carton of gumballs, break them into bags of 25, and go on the corner of 74th Street and Park Avenue where I spend time as a kid and try and sell bags of gumballs and do similar things. And I'd win, fun toys at, say, the Memorial Day Fair, and I could then sell teddy bears on the corner. It's sort of just an itch that one always has, but that was sort of starting at a young age and trying to sell something rather than really trying to create value, which is something I learned later in life. People will reward you if you can create value in their lives, and generally, if you're sort of impatient with the way things are going, or if you have solutions to big problems, you want to try to expose the world to those problems after you've thought them through and that you actually believe you can solve those problems.
Okay. So entrepreneurship has kind of always been with you, since day one.
I wouldn't say day one, maybe day 1200 when I was 4 or so.
Yeah.
I did have some traditional jobs in my 20s, and I was always trying to launch businesses on the side, which unfortunately didn't work out because I probably wasn't committed enough because I had a job that was keeping me in an office from sort of 8 to 7 or thereabouts. The real impetus for me starting my first company full-time was when I had an aneurysm in my heart and had to have open heart surgery.
Oh, no.
I was 29 years old. It was very scary, obviously, for my family, but I let the surgeons do what they do best. They saved my life, an incredible team up at Mount Sinai. And after that, I really looked in the mirror and I said, if you believe that life is short, you need to walk the walk, not just talk the talk. So that was really the impetus for me to launch my first business full time, although I'd been failing since a young age, trying to launch sort of consumer products ever since I was 4 or 5 years old.
Yeah, but many people would agree failing is part of the process of being an entrepreneur.
Yeah, and I want to disabuse any listeners of the notion that failure is romantic. Failure is not romantic. Failure is miserable. Failure sucks. Failure is painful. Failure makes you question yourself and why you chose to do the thing that you did. Self-doubt creeps in, which is the absolute nemesis of an entrepreneur who needs to have an overwhelming ability to have a positive mental attitude, what I call PMA, be extremely optimistic in the face of a lot of naysayers and in the face of losing constantly. And I liken it to baseball. I pitched for my whole life, even pitched a little bit in college. And as a pitcher, you get a lot of home runs hit off of you. That's the nature of the beast. But after you have a home run hit off you, you need to focus on the next pitch. Otherwise, the game's over, and you may as well just take yourself out of the game. So after you get a home run hit off you, you need to focus on striking the next guy out by focusing on an individual pitch and do whatever it takes to reset yourself, get calm, get your composure back. But again, failure is not fun, but it's probably inevitable for anyone who's willing to put him or herself out on the edge and try something different with his own or her own unique perspective.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that.
Can you explain what your role is at Walker Digital and what you do there?
Sure. So my title is Chief of Staff to Jay Walker. which is essentially to be a force multiplier on Jay's time. So tactically, my jobs to be done span a variety of tasks, including research and writing, figuring out how to tell stories better. And storytelling is so critical because once you have an idea, you need to convince others that what you're doing is unique and worth spending time learning about, potentially investing in, and getting behind. I also triage information as it comes in. I streamline a bunch of work so that I can free up Jay's time. I meet with partners and potential investors. Whenever Jay is going to a meeting, I try and give him briefings on who he's meeting with in terms of background and bio. Obviously, he knows who he's meeting with, but I try and do a little bit more digging into the history and try and figure out an interesting angle that person might be bringing to the table. And I coordinate among all of our internal team members when we're working on documents and ideas together, among others.
Wow. That's a mouthful right there.
I tried to keep it concise. I know it was a lot. It's an amazing opportunity. I love working with Jay. He's obviously an amazing visionary, makes things happen. He's a doer every day. And I'm lucky to be here.
Yeah, I agree. That sounds like a really, really cool job to work for Jay Walker like that. Sounds amazing.
It is. It's one where one has to prove himself every day and figure out how to add value. Like I said earlier in the conversation, adding value is critical and coming at things with a unique perspective, absorbing things. I try and listen really well and understand, obviously, the words that are coming out of people's mouths, but also what isn't being said, either through body language or through things I'm reading or things that are happening in the macro markets. So it's just trying to be a good student of entrepreneurship, of successful people, and of people that I respect.
Yeah. So moving on to our next question.
What challenging situations have you faced so far as an entrepreneur yourself and managing other entrepreneurs?
I mean, being an entrepreneur is basically going into battle every day. Every single day is a challenge. There's going to be issues relative to payment terms. There's going to be issues relative to if you're manufacturing anything, there's going to be delays and lag times. Things are never going to meet your expectation the first time around. Typically, it takes a lot more iterations and time and money and patience and persistence than you would think off the bat. Communication is one of the most challenging things in business. So clearly communicating, even with someone who is speaking the same language from you, from the same as you are, from the same town that you grew up in, who sits in the office next door to you, is not always easy. So when you're working internationally or across borders with people from different languages, from different cultures, communicating is very challenging. I failed numerous times, but again, I had a lot of home runs hit off me, but I also struck a lot of guys out. So the challenges are myriad and diverse and interesting, and hopefully one can learn from those failures. Not everything is necessarily easy to understand or palatable, but there are things that also are not under your control, like timing and market risks, and just generally things may or may not work out, and you may or may not be 100% in control of everything, and that's something that one has to realize over time as well.
Failing is always a part of being an entrepreneur. What do you see as the key lessons you should learn when you fail?
There are a lot of key lessons, but understanding why you failed is important. So having a really deep dive, debrief, once you've been able to gather yourself and sort of poll people and ask opinions, just to understand what different perspectives are. Because if you ask 100 people, you may get 105 different opinions. But to understand to have a lot of self-awareness and understand what the world thinks of you and why things happen the way they did is important. But you have to have a positive attitude. You have to have a hunger to learn. And you have to keep getting back on that proverbial horse. And if you don't want to get on the horse, fine, get in the car, but keep driving toward what you want to get to.
Yeah, it's a really good insight right there. Because, like I mentioned before, we all fail as entrepreneurs, and like you said, it's not always going to be pretty. So you should always try to find something to take away from it.
Yeah, and if you study entrepreneurs, most of the great entrepreneurs out there have tons of great quotes that you can learn from. I mean, a couple of my favorites are, Winston Churchill said success is the ability to go from one failure to another with no loss of enthusiasm. Henry Ford said failure is simply the opportunity to begin again, this time more intelligently. So life is really a maze of opportunity, of learnings, and as long as you don't let failure be fatal, you just keep on driving.
Yeah, definitely. And that kind of goes into our next question.
Do you have any favorite entrepreneurs? And if so, why are they your favorite?
Present company excluded with my current job. Sam Walton is one of my all-time favorites. He created debatably one of the best businesses of all time, and he was relentlessly focused on the customer experience and making the customer, giving value to the customer, providing goods that customers wanted that for the right price, regularly, consistently, easy to acquire relative to how far stores, Walmarts and Sam's Clubs and Super Walmarts are from people's homes. He's just an amazing guy. Bill Gates is able to create value every day for people all across the world. One of my favorites is J.K. Rowling, who has an amazing story of literally hitting rock bottom before climbing to the precipice of the world and being one of the best sold authors and one of the most globally renowned figures ever. So really, I appreciate someone that understands winning, understands how to win, understands that losing is part of the game. You want to avoid it and you want to fight through it. But anyone who is willing to admit that it wasn't easy and is willing to sort of bring back the cloak and show you who is that Wizard of Oz, and let you in on sort of the dirty little secrets, that failure is part of the game. I really appreciate that insight.
Yeah. So moving on to a different topic.
How do you identify and engage with your customers? How do you understand them?
So I've had a bunch of consumer product companies, and I'm a salesperson by nature. I love hearing people's reactions, seeing people's reactions to the taste, feel, smell of my products or whatever product I'm marketing. So I'm a boots on the ground kind of guy. So really driving around the country, either doing in-person trainings, in-person sales, in-person interviews, getting reviews, and not just among your friends, but among people from all different walks of the earth who hopefully are going to be consuming your product as long as they're in your target market, or even if they're out of it. It's really getting as diverse of an opinion base as you can get, and socking that knowledge away and using that data to refine either the product and or your messaging around that product, or creating new lines, because generally when an entrepreneur has an idea, that idea may or may not resonate with the customer. Typically, you're going to have to bob and weave a little bit and adjust based upon that data that you're receiving. So I want to get it directly from the horse's mouth if possible.
Yes, you always want to kind of get out of the office and see what the customer is saying and how they feel.
I mean, Sam Walton, if he wasn't in his store, he'd be, manning his little airplane to get to every store to understand what customers wanted. And it's really critically important to get out from behind your desk, unless you're, trading and doing something where it's not, where you have information coming to you from, say, research firms regularly, and people are coming into your office. It's generally pretty important to get out there and talk to as many people as you can, as often as you can, in earnest, and understand their perspective and their value system, because that data is critical to developing your business.
Yeah.
Outside of individuals, are there any books, classes, or sources, entrepreneurial themed or not, that really impacted you?
Not classes. I was a psychology major and I went to business school. Throughout business school, I was trying to launch my first business, and then ultimately did my sort of thesis capstone as my business plan, which I was launching at the same time of graduation. I would just say talk to as many successful people as you can. I think what you guys are doing with this Go Getter podcast, which I love, is critical, right? You're studying people from different walks of life, different levels of success, trying to network with as many folks as you can. And then if you really dig in and understand what motivated those people, understanding their stories, their life adventures, why they're doing what they're doing, their anxieties in the world, their inability to sit still, and their need to create things is important. Is really important if you want to be a successful entrepreneur, in my opinion.
Yeah, definitely.
Are there any projects or endeavors that you're working on today that we have not covered?
There's a whole litany of things we're working on at Walker Digital. I'm not going to get into them now. You can we can spend more time on that offline, but we touch things in gaming, we touch things in global healthcare, which is we're going to change the world in global health with an ultra low cost solution to a pre-filled syringe, which will save lives.
Great.
Yes, exactly. We have a business travel solution. These are among many other things. On the personal side, my 2.5-year-old son and I are writing his first book. He's excited about that. And I always enjoy helping friends out whenever they have ideas, especially related to consumer products, just because those things get me excited. So I do some just sort of pro bono help to whomever in my network wants it. I'm just one man with one opinion, but I'm happy to look at things from my perspective and try and give you whatever I know.
Sounds like you're always hustling.
Just playing the game as hard as I can, trying to leave it all on the field. Not to be cliche, but I think something important that I haven't mentioned is that today, and at least when I was growing up, people would say you need to find your passion and then dedicate yourself to that, which is actually really difficult because not everyone is passionate about any one thing. Some people have lots of different interests. Some people don't have many interests that they want to sink themselves into fully. But my advice would be commit to something. And when you commit to something, the task of reaching toward goals is actually a lot of fun because you can focus on what you've committed to. You can work hard because you know you're going to have an impact on something that matters to a greater cause than just you. And especially if you're working on a team where people come in fired up, your personal commitment to that, whether it's to a significant other, to a side project, to a side hustle, to your day job, committing to things, I think, is difficult for sure, but it shows that you're willing to throw yourself into something. And when you put all of yourself into something, you'll generally get a good amount of return out of your efforts.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like the same, exactly what you're saying here, what me and my friend are doing on the podcast. It's kind of like we have like a team and we're like working towards a greater cause. I mean, the cause may be a bit small, but it still feels like worthwhile because of that.
Listen, you guys committed to something. This is the beginning of, you don't know what it could be, and you had a goal on day one, and then 30 days later, the goals could have evolved, changed, stayed the same. Who knows? But as long as you continue to stay rigorous about the practice of doing these interviews, and say if you're doing one a month for the first 6 months, the next 6 months you might say, we want to do 2 a month, or we want to do 1 every week. So now we really need to start planning things. Maybe we need a virtual assistant to help us out in planning and doing a strategic plan of attack, and maybe we want to do entrepreneurs in certain sectors month by month and have different themes. But you've committed to something, which is great, and it's not just something you can put on your college application. It's something that's going to live hopefully forever. Which is something really cool.
Through college.
Yeah, exactly. And through college, and who knows, in 6 years when you guys have graduated, or 5 years, or however many years it is, you guys will probably graduate early because you're so bright and motivated. Although I recommend spending as much time in college as you can because it's a really wonderful part of life. You never know, this thing could take on a life of its own. So I recommend it. If you love doing it, do it as well as you can.
I do. Thank you.
Tell us about your thoughts on the intersection between entrepreneurship, technology, and social impact.
It's a broad question. It's a challenging question. I want to talk a little bit about AppEject here, which I know Jay talked about a little bit a few weeks ago. But what we're doing there is we're providing a solution to pre-filled syringes and we're trying to eliminate 10-dose vials, which are multi-dose vials filled with drugs and vaccines that are injected into people, mostly in low and middle income countries. Unfortunately, syringes and needles are reused millions and millions and billions of times every year, which spreads disease even in a healthcare setting. So we've been able to take a technology that's existed for a long time called BFS, blow, fill, seal. We've been able to match a needle on top of it with no leakage, no issues relative to manufacturing, produce at massively high speeds, over 34,000 an hour. And then we're able to ultimately put technology on each one of those syringes so we can track where, when, and to whom these injections are being given. So when you have Ebola outbreaks or any type of campaign anywhere in the world, we can actually see who's getting vaccinated or inoculated. So this is a healthcare solution for the entire globe, which is going to be produced at the ultra low cost, which is a business term for the cheapest thing ever created, essentially. That's trackable. So you have information on what's happening in the field, which essentially has never been done before. Today, things are written down in notebooks and often lost or smudged, and it's difficult to track things. But with technology, and if you leverage it in a really smart way, you can make things really inexpensively and thus accessible to the entire globe and ultimately save lives, which is what AppyCheck is about.
You're not underselling it when you're saying it could change the whole global health system.
I'm not trying to embellish either. I'm just, it was one of the things that I was most fired up about when speaking with Jay.
I can see.
It's a solution to a global problem that is not as publicized as it potentially should be.
Yeah, definitely.
And hopefully it will be a great global impact once we've fully executed and disseminated as many units as we can into the field.
Yeah.
Like we mentioned at the beginning of the episode, you mentor for the Street Squash program. Can you tell us more about this program and your role there?
Yeah, I love Street Squash. It's an urban youth enrichment program which combines squash, which is a racket game, not that dissimilar from racquetball, and mentoring and education. And for 15 years now, I've been a mentor to two young men who I met when they were 10 and 12 years old, I believe. Now one is going to be the head squash coach of a very well-renowned boarding school. They both went to fantastic small liberal arts schools in the Northeast. They were both captains of their squash teams, total rock stars. I started out I almost went to work for Street Squash full-time. I took a different job instead, but wanted to be really involved. So I led the young leadership committee there, the YLC is what they call it, and stayed really active while I was in New York City. Now that I'm in Connecticut, I'm not as directly involved, but I try and play in an annual tournament or two every year. I try and do a little fundraising with them. But I'm still in touch regularly with Raheem and Terrence, who are two incredible young guys, and I try and instill the whole mentorship philosophy into them so that they can give back, which they're clearly doing in their careers and with their lives. So it's amazing. It's taking one thing that I love in the world, which is squash, another thing I love in the world, which is relationships, and trying to combine them and just being as positive of a person I can in those guys' lives so that they can then pay it forward.
Yeah, it seems like nothing can get better than that for you.
And like always, what would you say is the single most important skill for your young entrepreneur to have or learn? Be hungry.
Be hungry to learn. Have a positive attitude. Again, PMA, I'll say it like I did earlier in the conversation. And you never know who is going to become a true leader. So if you're not a leader today, it doesn't mean you can't evolve into one. It doesn't mean you can't study. It doesn't mean you can't become a visionary. It doesn't mean you can't build a team. It doesn't mean you can't execute and be motivated to execute on your vision and have charisma and communicate clearly. But it's the desire to learn. It's the hunger to change the world or to do whatever you want to do. Like your parents always told you as a little kid, you can accomplish anything you want. you have to believe in yourself and be hungry to make things happen. I think that if you're hungry, you're always going to want to eat. And if you want to eat, you got to go kill something. So get out there, get hungry, and focus on what you want to do.
That was Mr. Michael Fensterstock with insight and advice on what it means to be an entrepreneur and how to be successful at being one. Make sure to follow us on Instagram at Young Entrepreneurs and on Facebook, and also on Twitter at YE Entrepreneurs. We have recently just launched our website, as you mentioned in previous episodes. Our website is www.youngentrepreneurs.com, and if you're interested in coming on the show, fill out the contact page, and we'll get right back to you. Anyways, me and Tony will be talking to you guys in the next one.